Good evening. Tony Dotson, alcoholic. If y'all forgive me, I'm going to forego the jacket tonight, so it's a little warm for that in here real quick. Thank you. Thank you, Steve. I want to thank the group. I've been coming here for a long time, and I really enjoy the quality of the Alcoholics Anonymous I found in this group, starting back with Tom inviting me to speak here, and Wallace and Richard and Steve. I'm asked to tell you in a general way what I used to be like, what happened, and what I'm like now. And, I always think about the big room, and that's where I have my mind on the ride over here. We're going to be in the big room. And certainly I've enjoyed many a celebration there, Tom's anniversary and Wallace's anniversaries and many others in that room. And I've had the privilege to conduct a group inventory for this group also. So really appreciate the opportunity to be a part of this group. My sobriety date is June the 13th, 1987. My home group is the Working with Others group, and we meet in Angier every Monday night at 7 o'clock at the Angier Baptist Church. It's located at 155 South Hickory Street in Angier. And if you're not at your home group and you're traveling in our area, come see us. We'd love to have you. It's a good group of Alcoholics Anonymous. When I was sitting here before the meeting and saying a prayer, and I've given a couple of talks recently, and I never know which direction this thing's going to go off in, and I try to open that channel with God and let Him take the experience of the absolute mess I made of my life, and help somebody to identify with that they too might be able to find sobriety and then find God, because ultimately that's the solution to the problem that I have, is a God of understanding. And throughout the big book, it talks very early on about that's probably our only hope. Is some sort of a divine intervention or a spiritual experience. Bill Wilson talks about that flash of light that he had, and one of the other gentlemen in the book talks about the wind blowing of spirit, and him being placed in a moment of ecstasy. Now my spiritual experiences have not been of that type, and thank God for the appendix 2 of spiritual experiences, to where mine was more of, I've certainly had a couple of spiritual experiences, I'll share those with you, but most of mine has been in the educational variety, that they happen slowly over time. As I became open-minded and I became willing to work these steps, I become willing to follow the directions of good sponsorship. My mind began to be transformed. The way that I thought was transformed. The way that I worked around other people was transformed. The way that I reacted to situations in life was transformed. I wish I had that very early on in life. I would have saved myself and my poor parents and my first wife's parents a lot of grief had I been able to find that earlier, but that just wasn't my story. You see, I'm a guy that started drinking at about 7 years old. I took my first drink of alcohol, and what it was for me was a moment of, now you got to realize that I'm a little fella. I was smaller than all of my cousins, it seemed like, and I had a favorite uncle, and still is today. He's still with me today, and I love him to death. But I was down at his house, and his son's nickname was Buckshot. And so I'm sitting there with Huff, who looks like Sergeant Carter off of Gomer Pyle. He was a Marine sergeant, was in the MPs, and did a lot of cool stuff in the military. So I love hearing those stories, and just he was my hero. And so I'm sitting on the couch watching football on a Sunday afternoon. My aunt's popping popcorn in the kitchen. And my cousin and I are wrestling over who's going to get the Pepsi-Cola bottle and who's going to have to drink out of that sissy glass. And as we're going over that bottle, my uncle walks in with this pretty red, white, and blue can, and it's sweat on it, and he's got salt on the top of it, and he takes a big swig, and he goes, ah. I lost all interest in the popcorn, the football game, and everything else. I immediately wanted to know, why did he go, ah? He had my undivided attention. And so we started beating on him. No, let me have a sip. No, 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 your mom will kill me. Let me have a sip. No, 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 your mom will kill me. So this went on for a little bit, and finally he caved, and he looked around, made sure nobody was watching, and he grabs the back of my cousin's neck, and he just wets his lips, I'm thinking, I'm not going down like that. That beer comes my way, I'm going to wrestle it out of his hand, and I'm going to get that thing and get all I can, and I did. And I got it all in, and it was about to start running out my nose. I got so much in my mouth, and I swallowed that beer down, and he wrestled that can away. And I burped really loud. And man, that thing was just, that Pabst Blue Ribbon beer was crisp and clean and refreshing. I'll never forget it. It was a whole lot better than that Pepsi. And that salt, he had the right idea to put that salt on top of that can. Boy, it blended with that beer just right. And it tasted, I was like, boy, I got to have some more of that. Now, not from a phenomenon of craving, but just I enjoyed the taste of it. I talked to a lot of people in AA. Didn't think a Pabst Blue Ribbon beer tasted that good to them, but it was surely good to me. And so it just completed that moment of watching football with my Marine sergeant uncle and my buckshot cousin, and I'm drinking PBR and watching football on a Sunday afternoon. How manly man can you get, So that's kind of where it all started. Certainly didn't drink alcoholically from that moment on, but I drank enthusiastically from that moment on. And what I mean by that was, if you left a beer unattended, or if I could convince you into giving me some, I was going to get as much as I could. And I remember the first time, I was probably a teenager, the first time I got enough beer in me to get that numb feeling. You just kind of get numb. And I was already being a smaller redheaded kid and picked on a lot, and I used to fight at the school bus stop in the morning, on the bus, off the bus at school, waiting for the bus in the afternoon. I grew up with some rough kids, boy. They believe in breaking you in right, and so I was just constantly in turmoil with these other kids and everything. And the fear started early on, fear of what people would think of me if I lose this fight. What do they think of me if I don't get in this fight? Just all that kind of stuff playing in my head. And I don't know if everybody else does that. I know us alcoholics certainly share that from the podium. But I can remember the first time that I had a lot of anxiousness and fear about a certain situation. And I remember we got a couple of beers. We swiped them from the mom and dad or whoever, but we got a couple of beers, and it just seemed like that little lightheaded, that little numbness that we get from enough beer to get that little that little buzz going on, and all that stuff went away, and I felt at ease. That sense of ease and comfort that Dr. Silkworth talks about was certainly early on for me, but there was too many of the other things he talks about was true too. It started becoming injurious for me. Started having a lot of problems with my drinking early on. But I can remember when that beer worked, and I felt okay with the world, and man, I would trade anything for that feeling, because I had been anxious, full of fear, and at odds with most everybody in my life most of the time, except for my real close friends that just accepted me for who I was and the way I was. But I always felt like I had to prove myself. I always had to be better than or whatever. I'm not sure what that's all about. So drinking for me was two things. I enjoyed the taste of it, at least for the beer, and it kind of made me feel more confident, more at ease within myself. And so drinking for me looked like a pretty good idea. I remember not long into my early teenage years that it was probably the first time that I had been given an opportunity to drink without anybody controlling how much I drank. Usually it was controlled by the amount we had because we were swiping mom and dad's alcohol, so we had limited resources, so I could only get so much to begin with. But we would camp out a lot. I lived down east on the water, and we camped out a lot down at the creek, and we would fish all night and do different crazy things, and just being boys. And I remember in the spring of the year when the river herring would come upstream to spawn, and we would catch them just by the netfuls, and we would clean and cook those fresh herring on the riverbank, and fry cornbread and stuff. And these older men would come down, and they have a cooler full of beer. Now they must not have made a lot of money, because I look back now and they had the Falstaff Schlitz Malt Liquor Bull, Country Club Malt Liquor Bull. They had a lot of old cheap beer, but we were tickled to death to get it, man. It's like, yeah, get it. Y'all boys, help yourself. They're eating this fish. Help yourself. And we did. And we dig down in there and try to find something we recognized. And I saw that Falstaff. I said, I remember that Falstaff. There weren't no PBRs in there because I'd have fished them out. But I went with that Falstaff. My buddy went with the Country Club, and we were working on. We were trying to stay with the same beer. Somehow or another, we inclinedly just knew that once you start with one brand, you need to stick with that same brand. I don't know where that came from, but instinctively we knew to do that. So we were fishing around trying to get the same beer. Well, somewhere in the middle of all this drinking and eating and having a big time, I went into my first blackout, and didn't know what that was. Didn't know you'd have them. I didn't know that you could drink too much because I'm totally inexperienced. I'm 13 years old. I have no idea what's going to happen. All I knew was I was having a good time. They tasted good, and I just did what I always did. Once I started drinking, I just kept putting them in. It didn't dawn on me, Tony, you're about 100 pounds soaking wet. And you've drinking a lot of beer tonight, and you might want to cut that off a little bit. That thought never entered my mind. I had no idea that you're supposed to do that. I thought you just drink and drink, just like everybody else around me was drinking. And what happened next was I came to in our tent somewhere in the wee hours of the morning, wet and cold, and I was mad. Terrible headache. Boy, that stuff I was drinking gave me a whopping headache. And I woke up them boys. I was picking a fight with all them boys in the tent and trying to, because I just knew they threw me in the creek. And they're like, no, man, we didn't have to throw you anywhere. You in everything. You jumped in the fire. You jumped in the creek. You jumped on them grown men. You just went crazy. When you finally went over and passed out in that tent, man, we were just tickled to death that you just went in there and passed out. You wore us down, man. You beat us down. We were glad you were gone. We never seen you act like that before. We told the men, he don't normally act like that. He's usually a good kid. It's like the Tasmanian devil or something, But that's kind of how my drinking started, and it would be like that. I would go out to have a good time, and sometimes I'd have a really good time, and sometimes I wouldn't. And I never knew when you flipped the coin which way that was going to go. And that was kind of my drinking career. It was like that. I mean, I got into trouble early on. Got pulled over at 16 years old, had my license about 30 days, out drinking and riding around with a bunch of my friends in the car. I had an old 68 Ford Falcon, 4-door, 3-speed on the column, just nothing fancy. It was an old solid car. And we were out riding around, and I'm 30 days sober. I mean, driving for the first time in 30 days, I won't sober. And we were riding around, and we had a buddy of mine swiped a bunch of wine from the grocery store. I guess he did. He had it all tucked in his coat pockets. And so he'd stole cigarettes and wine, and we went out and we were drinking this stuff on top of the beer we had taken from our parents. And we gave up those I think I had some Pall Mall Gold 100s, my grandmama's, and we gave them up for some Marlboro Reds when he got those. So we had some cigarettes, and we started on that wine. Now the wine, here's the wine selection. It's about as lowbrow as the beer. So we had the Richards Wild Irish Rose, we had the Mogan David 2020, and we had the Thunderbird. And so we rounded it off, and we didn't know any better, so we just popped the top and drank all the one, popped the top, threw it out in one, and drank all the other one. And so things are going pretty good, and I'm starting to forget how to make that 3-speed on the column work, and the clutch, and the wipers I had on those old cars run off a vacuum. So as you speed up, they slow down, and as you slow down, they speed up, And so it's snowing now, and it's snowing like crazy, and it was a spring snow. We're just like, it's like February. We were getting one of those nor'easters blew in, and February, early March, somewhere in that time frame, and we were just so excited because all the kids, we were going to go meet at the river. We're going to have a big time bonfire and all this kind of stuff. And so I'm driving and getting the machinations, moving all these gears and stuff, and I got my cigarette tucked in. I hit the dash with that cigarette, and it goes into the floorboard, and I can see it. And them old cars didn't have carpet; they just had rubber in the floorboard. And I could see it, and I was watching it, and that old car had about a half a turn play before it actually moved. And so I was trying to figure out how much I was going to have to do to get that thing over here where I could pick it up. And I'm watching the road, and the guys are all in the back, and I finally get that cigarette where I want it, and I go down and I fish it out. And when I come up, there's headlights coming at me, and he's blowing the horn. So I swing over in this lane, and he goes down in the ditch, and my buddies thought that was the funniest thing. They burst into laughter. We're all like laughing. I can't hardly drive now. And that guy comes out of that ditch and cuts that big old blue light on, and the whole world lit up blue. And I was like, oh my God. And I pulled in the ditch on my side of the road and didn't realize how steep it was a bad idea because the door wouldn't stay open. I was trying to get out, and they don't like you to exit the vehicle, not even back then. And what's happening now, I'm going to describe what happens to me is this phenomenon is that once the blue light came on, it might have had something to do with all the wine I drank, but once that blue light came on, I was acutely aware that my tongue began to swell. I began to sweat profusely. My stomach's rolling. I'm about to get sick, and I'm in bad shape, and I'm in bad shape fast. And I'm not sure what to do. And about that time, the officer was walking up to the car with that big flashlight, and he wanted license and registration. And eventually, and I'm just opening the door, I want to get out. And every time I open that door, I would see these really shiny patent leather shoes, these starch press pants. And there I get a glimpse as I'm coming up. And he had this utility belt on like something Batman would have. And he had a big old revolver cylinder looked that big, you know. He a big blackjack, and I'm just thinking, God, don't let me throw up on this man's shoes. He'll beat me to death with that blackjack if I throw up on his shoes. Just let me out of this car, you know. So he finally got that light where he could see the distress in my face, and he just steps out of the way, lets me out of the car, and I go over there off the side there and start taking care of business. And he gets all my buddies out, and there's like a street light there, and he's got all my buddies, and they're all looking up at him, and they look over at me and go. And then they look back up at him, and he starts talking. And they look over at me and go, and then they look back up at him, and I'm like, what in the world is going on over there? You know, I'm trying to get myself together, and finally he's doing like this, and I've got to walk over there. And I'm thinking, oh God, I'm going to jail. Dad's going to kill me. My life as I know it's over. It's just over. And he gets us over there, and what seemed like an eternity, he's scared the bejeebies out of all of us. And then he starts smiling, and I think that can't be good. And he grabs a buddy of mine, and he says, Mr. Dotson, tonight's your lucky night. This young man's the only one in the whole carload that's not been drinking. And we're all looking like, what's he not been drinking? What's up with that? And he says, if it's okay with you, we're going to let this gentleman drive you boys home tonight. Is that okay with you? I was already going for the keys, man. Oh, yeah, you can have the car for that matter, because my dad would have killed me. That would have been like death. That would have been death sentence for sure. So I'd do anything. Just, yes, sir, no problem. We're going straight home. Yep. And we got in that car and went home, and you know, that's just kind of how it happened. Was I went out to have a good time. I started having a really good time, and then I'd overshoot the mark, and trouble would ensue. That was injurious. That drinking became injurious. Even though I saw other people drinking normal, and they didn't have a problem. And I thought, well, maybe it was just, maybe I didn't eat enough, or maybe I drank the wrong thing. You know, we always try those different things, or why, trying to figure out why I can't seem to drink successfully. And this went on. So to kind of wrap this thing up for you and put a bow on it with my drinking career was that I had a really good time drinking. Even though with all the misadventures and the near-death experiences and wrecked cars and all this kind of tragedy that was off and on in my drinking career, you know, it took me a long time to get beat into that state of reasonableness that the big book talks about. I managed to get through high school. I managed to get into a community college. Didn't know if you just paid the money and passed the test, they'll put you in there. It's not like a 4-year university. I didn't take any SATs. I didn't plan on doing anything with a 4-year university. I think I was like 2 months getting ready to graduate high school, and the guidance counselor says, Tony, what are you going to do after graduation? I said, oh, no, let's come here and talk about it. 2 months. Great idea, Tony. Let's come here and talk about it. So I want to go to Greenville to Pitt Community College. That's the closest big city. So I didn't want to stay at home with the parents. I wanted to be free. So free I was. And for about the next year and a half, I wanted to kill myself in Greenville, North Carolina, drinking all I could. I found myself in and out of a lot of trouble in there. I had found every form of trouble you could find. And when it came down to an end of that, it came through consecutive drunk driving tickets, one right after the other. And they took my license. I had to get out of school, had to get my mom to take me to the pawn shops to get my guns and all the stuff I'd hawked off to get money to party with. When I run out of money, I was quick to go put it in the pawn shop, but I was pretty good when I got paid to go get it out. Well, there toward the end, I wasn't so anxious to get it out because I needed that money to keep going. So I had to tell Mom, look, I need to go get this, and this. And bless her heart, she took me to all them places and cleaned that mess up for me. And here I go back home to live with the parents. I'm 21 years old, and I've had a lot of bad experiences, a lot of good times, but I had a lot of bad experiences too. And I had one experience where that it was a Saturday, and it was a great Saturday because it was a football game. ECU was playing somebody, and we were all going to the game. And we started drinking that morning. We all went to the grocery store, and we bought this generic beer. It's just a white can with blue letters that said beer. It's like $1.65 a six-pack or something like that, cheap stuff. And we just filled the refrigerator full as much as we could and made sure we turned them off so no matter whether you read beer, no matter how you looked at it. And we started drinking that Saturday morning. And the next thing I know, I came to, and the only thing was me and Willie. Willie Nelson was playing on the stereo, and I was listening to that, and I was listening and nobody else in the house. And I thought, I'm not supposed to be drinking alone. You might be an alcoholic if you're drinking alone. I said, but it's not my fault. I started drinking. They were here. They left. They stayed. I've been all right. So I got to get out of here. I got to go find me someplace to go. So missed the game altogether. So I said, well, I'm going to go down to Pantana Bob's and play me some foosball. That's what I'm going to go do. So I went down to Pantana Bob's, started playing foosball, and I was playing foosball. And when you win, you stay on the table, and people challenge you. And if you win, they buy you one of those nice, good, long neck Budweisers. And I don't know how many of those good long neck Budweisers I drank. The mantle there by the foosball table was pretty full by the time I came out of a blackout and realized that where I was and what was going on. And I'd finally got drunk enough to lose and got off that table. And I know I was running my mouth because I was bad about running my mouth when I was drinking and playing anything. And I know they was glad that guy's done. Get him out of here. But I started to get hot and flush again like I'd always do. I could always feel it coming on. So I said, I'm going to go outside and cool off. And I get outside, and I don't know what transpires. I went into another blackout. I just passed out entirely this time. And I'm coming to, and I'm cold. And I'm thinking, man, that can't be good. And I hear these little voices, and it's just really, it's the good people's voice. Their vocabulary, their tenderness, their concern for me. This little Christian couple had come through this alley and found me about half naked, passed cold out in the alley. They were trying to revive me, couldn't revive me. They were about to call 911 when I finally came to. And they had taken my shirt and my shoes. Thank God they didn't take my pants. So I come to, and I can hear their voices, and I'm just like, I did not want to open my eyes. I was hoping they'd leave, and they didn't leave. So I knew I had to do something. I didn't want them to call an ambulance. And they were talking about God had sent them through that alley, and that they never come through that alley, and they never would have, and they knew why God sent them through that alley was to be there for me. Now I'm already feeling guilty and shame and remorse and all that stuff, and this just did not help me at all. And I'm trying to collect my goods and get out of there, get away from them as fast as I can. And that just seemed to be what happened for me, was I'd have some good times, and then something like that would happen. And I had to drink really hard the next day to push that memory as far back in my mind, as hard as I could. I'd open it and never see the light of day again. And I can tell you what happened for me was that's the way that my drinking kind of went. But one of the final moments for me, and I wish I could tell you that I could have stopped at this point. I went through people in my life like water. And I had about run everybody out of my life, and at this point, I had managed to. I got back home. I got a job. I was waiting to get my license back, and things were starting to look up for me a little bit. I met this young girl. Re-met this girl. I knew her in high school, but we didn't like each other. She was about a year younger than I am. She was in a lower grade. And I run into her at this restaurant there in hometown, man, and she is cute. And I'm like, oh my gosh, she just blossomed, And she was with a buddy of mine that I didn't think much of. I said, well, if she'll date him, I'm a shoe-in. That guy's a joke, that ego and pride and puffed up self we talk about. And so I made a play for her and won. And that, bless her heart, God bless her. I know she wished she'd never done that. But anyway, we are still friends today, amazingly so. But she loves Alcoholics Anonymous. She thinks it's the greatest thing. She just cannot believe the transformation that happened to this old boy. But anyway, her and I started dating, and we were doing the long distance relationship. And I'm going to share this with you because when we read how it works, we talk about that men and women, when you are constitutionally incapable of being honest with yourself, and that doesn't seem to be our fault. We seem to be born that way. But our chances are less than average of getting sober, unless we can find some way to get honest. And so I had been doing a long-distance relationship, and that kind of come to an abrupt end when I got caught in that final lie, the last straw. And what happened was I was out drinking all weekend. I didn't go home that weekend. I told her I had to work, which was a lie. And I was working on getting drunk all weekend. And I had one roommate there, and the other roommate was out of town. And the roommate was out of town, come in. She calls. He answers the phone. Yeah, Tony's been here. I'll just put a note on the refrigerator, and he'll call you when he gets back in. I think him and so-and-so's down the road. They'll be right back. And she said, he's not working? She said, I don't think so. So anyway, I come in, and there's a note to call Janice. And so I pick up that phone and reluctantly call and act like nothing's wrong, and then that's not going to fly. So we get into this big heated discussion about my lying about my drinking and all the stuff I've been doing. And so, she says, I really don't mind you drinking. She said, I just wish you wouldn't lie to me about your drinking. So, idea. Well, I'll get some help for lying, baby. We'll fix that lying thing. I can drink all I want, but just don't lie about it. So I go to work, start talking to my buddies, and Larry, Mo, and Curly, we get together in there, and we come up with some ideas. And one of them was to go to the mental health and talk to the psychiatrist there and get some help. They'll tell me how to not lie about my drinking. So, right, a good idea to me. So, run that by the girlfriend, and she's like, yeah, thumbs up, So, in Raleigh on Falstaff, I'm not lying, the road is called Falstaff Road. It's right behind Wake Med, Falstaff Road. So, on Falstaff Road, Wake County Mental Health was here, and ATC was right there, right across the street. I was almost where I needed to be, was the Alcohol Treatment Center, not at the mental health. I might have needed to be in both, but I was going to the mental health to keep able to keep drinking. So I go in there, and I'm not really knowing what to expect. And I go in there, and they got a questionnaire. It's a lot like our questions, and it would be like questions like, has your drinking caused you a problem at home? Has your drinking caused you a problem at work? Has your drinking caused you a problem at school? Different areas of your life, has your drinking caused you a problem? And it's just simply check yes or check no. And man, I'm checking, I'm writing in the margin, I'm flipping that thing over, looking places to write. And that little psychologist, she's looking at me, and it's supposed to be like a 5-minute thing. 10 minutes later, I'm over here trying to figure out where I'm going to write an explanation of why I answered yes on this thing. And she's just like, stop. Just come on. You pass. Come on. That's not a good thing, by the way. And she says, come on with me. And took me right into the psychiatrist. That is not a good thing. You're supposed to just go to the psychologist, and if you're really bad, it's just like, nope, I can't help this guy. Just get him right on in there. And so the psychiatrist, she was as amused at me as the psychologist was. So she's looking at this thing, and she's looking at the questions, and she's smiling real pretty, and she's like, so, Mr. Dawson, she says, I see you drink this much after work. Yes, ma'am. She says, you drink a couple. Yes, ma'am. Now, let me define a couple. That is 2 beers every time I stop at a convenience store on my way home. That's 12 couples, but that's a couple, right? A couple at a time. That's how I defined a couple. So, it's 12 beers, 2 at a time, 6 times, couple, right? So, that's a couple. And so she was amused at my math. And she asked me questions about lying, and I'm lying to her, and she's really amused at that. And I think the only thing, I know for sure, the only thing I answered on that thing truthfully was I never drank while pregnant. That's the only thing I never did. Have you drank pregnant? No. That's the only thing that was truthful. The rest of them, it's all sketchy. But what she did for me was that she forced me and forced my hand by writing on a business card, which my ego thought I was going to her private practice to get me out of that county mental health center that I thought was going to be like One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest with Jack Nicholson or something. And I was the sickest cat in there, clearly. And she passed me that little business card, and it said Alcoholics Anonymous and telephone number, drug action in Wake County, and a telephone number. Now, I'm 25 years old. I am way too hip, slick, and cool. Actually, I was about 24 at that time. I was way too hip, slick, and cool for Alcoholics Anonymous. So I went to the other fellowship and lasted about 3 or 4 months. And here's how it went down. I'm going to meetings. I'm going out bowling. I love the fellowship, man. We got a great fellowship, and these two, oh, man. I'd go to meetings. We'd go out to eat. We'd go bowling. We'd go to the park. We had just a good time going to meetings. So I wasn't going home on the weekends. I'm going to meetings, you know. And So I hear in the meeting, that you can't make any major decisions in the first year of recovery. You shouldn't do that. So we got a wedding planned for September, and I'm trying to tell her, honey, we got to put that wedding off. I can't make no major decisions in recovery here. We got to put that thing off. And she's looking at me, and she says, I really don't think you need to go to the meetings anymore. And I said, me neither, darling. There I went. I was gone. Right back to the races. And what that looked like was that ended up with a felony possession with intent to distribute. They ended up with a loss of a job 30 days into recovery. That ended up with me just a train wreck of my life coming to an abrupt stop when I hit the wall, and she's packing the suitcase because she's done. She's like, I'm out of here. And she was putting clothes in, and I was taking clothes out. She was putting them in, I was taking them out. And we finally just stopped, and I said, I need help. I want help. I'm serious about it this time. I really need to do something about my drinking or I'm going to die. And she said, okay. And so about 30 days later, I come home with a beer, and she's looking at me, and she's just like, what went wrong, And I said, well, we wrecked the car. You got a hurt leg. I was sober. Wrecked the car sober. How do you wreck a car sober? The other guy's fault. He turned in front of me, T-boned him, hurt you. I said, it's just life's not good. Work's not going well. I'm just restless, irritable, and discontent is what I was. And didn't know what that meant, didn't know what it looked like. I had no sponsor, no steps, no home group, no solution. That's what I didn't have. And the only thing I knew how to do was drink and lie. And drinking looked good to me. So I stopped and got me a tall Budweiser, and I started home. I got about halfway through that Budweiser when I got home, and she looked at me, and she talked to me, and she talked me off the ledge and said, won't you pour the rest of that out and go to a meeting tonight? That was a Wednesday night, and I did that. And Thursday night came, I went to a meeting, I didn't pick up a chip. Friday night came, I didn't pick up a chip. Saturday night came, and I knew if I walked out of that meeting, and here's the name of the meeting, this is God for me, Surrender to Win. Honest to God, that was the name of the meeting, Surrender to Win. I walked in there, and I knew that if I left that night without getting honest and throwing in the towel, that I probably would never make it back. And when I walked in that meeting and immediately felt comfortable, and it was real close to my home at the time. And the people were talking about drinking like I drank. And they were talking about all the other outside issues that I did that got me in a lot of trouble financially and otherwise. And they talked about the unmanageability in their life. But then they talked about stuff that was unfamiliar with me. Was they talking about solution? I didn't have a solution. And but I was interested. I was interested in anything that would get me out of the mess I was in. In the doctor's opinion, he talks about that our problems pile up on us and they seem astonishingly difficult to solve. Man, I get that every time I read that. I go right back to that moment in time with my train wreck of a life. And men and women drink essentially because they like the effect produced by alcohol. That was me. But even though I find it injurious, I cannot differentiate the true from the false. And I would go back to drinking. And I remember that man coming up to me after the meeting because I shared a little bit in the meeting because I was afraid if I didn't, I'd leave. And I picked up a white chip, and the guy come up and talked to me after the meeting, and he asked me two simple questions. He said, are you willing to do anything to stay sober? I don't remember anybody ever asking me that question. I had judges talk to me, state troopers, sheriffs, my mother, people in the church. I've been dunked, dipped, sprinkled, and everything else to try and help me get sober, and nothing helped me get sober. And this guy was sober 3 years, and I thought that was just unbelievable. And he said the next question he had was, do I have a sponsor or do I know what that is? And I said, no to both. And he said, well, I'll tell you what we'll do. He said, let's talk. And he said, and in the morning you call me and we're going to go to a meeting tomorrow morning. And what that looked like is that was somebody in Alcoholics Anonymous, like the men in this group and women in this group, that when a newcomer comes in, they don't let you leave alone. They don't let you leave with a pamphlet with some meetings circled on it. You've got their number. They've got our number. We're going to call you if you don't call us. That kind of situation. And thank God, because what this guy did for me, how am I doing on time? Because how am I doing on time?
7:43.
Okay, all right. So what this guy did for me is that he provided me a network of people in Alcoholics Anonymous. He took me to his home group in AA because we were at an NA meeting, and he took me to his home group in AA because he said, Tony, even though you got all this other stuff going on, he said, Bo, you clearly in the camp of the alcoholic. He said, we need to go to some AA meetings. Let's take you to AA. He said, I think you're going to find a solution to your problem. And I really didn't want to go to AA because I'm 25 years old. I'm hip, slick, and cool. I don't need to be in there with all them old blue hairs. I just don't need to be in there. This is not going to work for me. Man, I'll tell you, I could not be wronger about anything than I was that moment. Because I walked in that meeting and I was just like, this has got to be like a church group or something. This can't be AA. Those people were laughing. They looked good. They smelled good. The coffee was done. I didn't even drink coffee back in those days, and I certainly didn't eat cookies because I got all my sugar from alcohol. But this old lady comes up and she says, "Come on, honey, get you a cup of coffee and some cookies and sit down." And I'm just about to grit my teeth. I'm so mad because I'm just restless, irritable, discontent. And I'm like, okay, And Henry says, "Come on, come sit down." And as the meeting's going on, these people are talking about me. And I'm wanting to know how they figured out how they're doing an investigation or something, because they're talking about me. They're talking about that same crazy stuff that I did. And it was them and their crazy stuff. And I began to identify with them. And they made me feel at home, and they welcomed me. And they made me feel that unconditional love that we find in Alcoholics Anonymous. What happened for me in that transformation is that I began to become assimilated in Alcoholics Anonymous, and what that looked like for me is that I had an old timer in that group, and I had a sponsor, a man sponsor and all this, but there was an old timer in that group, and she was like one of the founding, been there a long time, and for some reason she took a liking to me. She don't like a lot of people, but she took a liking to me. She was crusty, but for some reason she was a salty old gal, and she would wait for me at that door because she knew at 9 o'clock I was going out that door to smoke quickly and exit stage left. And I didn't want to hang around and hug and talk to y'all. I just wanted to go outside, smoke, and be mad. And I wanted you to leave me alone. And she waited for me to hit that door, and she grabbed me, and I pulled her about halfway down the hall before she finally got me stopped. And she just wanted to know what I was so mad about. And I started to tell her. And she said, "Come on outside, hon, let's smoke a cigarette. We'll talk about it." Because, see, I was so eat up with resentments, I didn't know what was wrong. I didn't know why I felt the way I did. I just knew I was angry. And she invited me to the next night. They were having, we have big book studies. It's not really a meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous. We get some home group members together, some sponsees together, and we go through the big book Alcoholics Anonymous. They did the same thing with that in the 12 and 12, and they would go through the 12 steps. And those old timers spoon-fed me the 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous. And what that helped me do was, one day, at about 3 months in sobriety, and I'd never been sober that long before, in about 10 years, and so I was coming unglued, and I couldn't tell you why. I didn't really know what was going on. I just knew I was coming unglued, and I left work one day, and I was restless, irritable, and discontent, and I could smell bourbon, I could taste bourbon. I wanted to drink a liquor so bad, and I went home, and I was pacing the floor, and I knew where to go and to get exactly what I needed to make me feel better, and this saying in Alcoholics Anonymous back in those days was the time to call your sponsors before you drink, not after. And so that's rattling around in my head, and I said, fine, I'm going to call him. He's not going to be home. He never is, not this time of day. I'm going to call him. He's not going to be home. I'm going to get drunk. It's all his fault. I'm blaming it all on him. Get a freebie. And that joker picked up on the first ring. And I'm like, man. And he talks me off the ledge and talks me over to his house. And what happened next is that he took me through all of the misadventures, the near-death experiences, the hospitalizations, the wrecked cars, all that crazy stuff that happened to me while I was out there drinking and bumping into things. And he helped me to fully concede to my innermost self that I was an alcoholic, in fact. And then when he had me at my lowest point, he said, "Tony, where do you stand with God?" And I'm just like, man, you got to ask me that. I said, "Look, dude," I said, "I believe in God. I just don't think he believes in me anymore." I said, "I turned my back on God a long time ago to live the way I wanted to live, and I just think he's over. I think just too many marks beside my name in the wrong column, and they just don't want to do with me." And he dropped his head, and he shook his head, and he said, "Tony, I just do not understand how you can possibly think that after what we just talked about." He said, "Let me run this by you." He said, "Okay, who do you think sent that couple in the alley? Who do you think pulled you out of the storm drain when you're about to drown and called an ambulance for you and sent you to the hospital to where they saved your life? Who do you think helped you out of all those cars? Who do you think helped you in every situation that you were in and while you are living and standing right here before me today? How do you think you got there without God? It would be impossible for you to get here without God." And so the next thing he wanted to do was hold hands and say a prayer, and I'm just don't hold men's hands. I'm just not. it's not me. I can't do this. And he's just like, did you mean what you said or not? And I said, what are you talking about? And he said, did you mean you were willing to go to any length to stay sober? And I said, yes. He said, then we're going to pray, and we're going to hold hands when we pray. I said, okay. So we got down beside his couch and we prayed a prayer. I don't know what it was. I knew today was a third step prayer, but I was just saying what he told me to say and doing what he told me to do. And I was still ill at ease, and I was still wanting to drink, and I got up off my knees and I started home. And on the way home, this sense of peace came over me. It was unusual because I'd never experienced anything like that before. And everything got calm, and my head slowed down, and all that noise and confusion just stopped. And for just a moment in time, I was at absolute peace and ease. And somehow I knew that I'd never take another drink unless I chose to. Don't know why that is, other than just God. But that's kind of the experience I had. And the big book talks about that third step, that if we voice it without reservation, when we take that prayer, voicing it without reservation, so sometimes an effect, a great one, is felt at once. And that's what happened for me. And I went through steps 4 and 5 with this guy, and I went through 6, 7, and 8, and I went and made amends to that mother-in-law and father-in-law, to my parents, to the people that I had hurt so much with my drinking. Work began to change. I got a really good job. I got laid off 30 days into recovery, got a job working for this company I'm still working for now, 30-some years later. And what happened for me was the doors began to open. As my mind opened and my willingness opened, God transformed my life and started putting people in my life. And one thing I want to share before I get too close, if I'm not already. So life gets good. About 7 years into sobriety, my first wife and I split up. Very hard thing for me to do. I change home groups, and I meet my good friend who's now my sponsor. And my new wife and I were trying for a family, and we get pregnant right away, and we end up losing the first child. And man, it just crushed me. And I went to this guy and I said, look, you helped my buddy Todd so much taking him through that big book. I really need to do that because I'm at a loss. I'm sponsoring people. I'm going to meetings. I'm doing everything I'm supposed to do. And I can't quite get over this losing my child thing. I need some help. I'm struggling here spiritually. And he said, sure, Tony, be at my house at 5:30 in the morning. I said, 5:30 a.m. He said, yeah. That gonna be all right? I said, yeah, it's gonna be just fine, Bo, no problem. And I live about 45 minutes from him, so I had to get up at 4 o'clock every morning. And I did that, and God bless him, he did that with me for months. Every morning we sat in his home office, knee to knee, reading line for line out of that big book. And the powerful spiritual experience that came to me out of that result was that I had a program of action now, based on the integrity of the program of action in Alcoholics Anonymous, that the flying blind period had ended, we talk about, because now I had a solution. I saw the solution. And I began to bring all my sponsees into that. And I watched this thing, that mushrooming process that happened early in AA, I watched it in my home group. As everybody else started doing that, we all started to grow. And we all started to change, and the group started to grow. And I just watched this whole thing come to life. And that's what happened for me. And now, fast forward to now, is that not only did I get through a divorce without having to take any drastic actions, I made it through that. I made it through my mother and stepfather divorcing. I made it through a good friend of mine dying at 43 years of age of congestive heart failure. My sponsor, my wonderful sponsor that I love to death, got drunk at 9 years of sobriety. And all this happened in about a 2-week period of the time that me and my wife split up. So life is not looking good, man. So I've been through some rough times in sobriety, but the one thing that always showed up for me was the solution. God was there, and a good sponsor always got me through that stuff. And so without a home group and without God, without prayer, I don't have anything. So what my life looks like today, to close this thing out, is that where I'm at today is I'm still in the same job. I'm in a career now. I just got a promotion back in April. And I'm married to the same woman. This October we'll be married 20 years. My daughter is 16. She'll be 17 in September. And I can't tell you how full my life is right now. It's amazing what Alcoholics Anonymous has done to transform my life into something that's happy and purposeful. And I didn't have any of that when I got here. So thank you very much. Appreciate you letting me share.
Thank you, Tony.